The radiator in my apartment doesn't hiss anymore. It just sits there, cold and dead, like a tombstone in my living room. I checked my bank balance at the ATM outside the Walmart on 2nd Street this morning. $4.12. That's what 45 years at the mill and a lifetime of service gets you in Pittsburgh these days. I walked home with a single loaf of bread and a tin of generic soup, my joints screaming with every step. When I got to my door, there was a bright orange sticker plastered over the lock. Disconnected. I went inside, my breath blooming in the air like white ghosts. I didn't care about the lights, but I needed the fridge. My wife Martha's insulin was in there. She's been gone 3 years, but I keep her last vial on the top shelf. It's the only thing left of her I can still touch that feels like it has life in it. As I sat in the dark, my phone buzzed. It was David, my only son. I thought he was calling to check on me. I thought he remembered it was my 79th birthday. "Dad?" he said, his voice clipped and efficient, like he was talking to a vendor at his marketing firm. "I saw the notice from the utility company. I told you this would happen. You can't manage your own life anymore." "I just had an issue with the pension check, David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The SSA office said there was a glitch. I'll fix it tomorrow." "No, you won't," David snapped. "I've already spoken to a social worker. I'm filing for power of attorney. You're becoming a liability, Dad. You're useless in that apartment, just rotting away. It's time for the home." I looked at the photo of him on my mantle, the one where he's 5 years old and wearing my veteran's cap. My chest felt like someone had tightened a steel band around it. "I'm not going to a home, son. I've lived in this city before you were a thought." "It's not a request," he said, and I heard a click on the other end. He hadn't hung up. A second voice came on the line, a woman I didn't recognize. "Mr. Carter?" she said. "This is the county office. We've received a report that you're living in a condemned unit with no heat. We'll be there at 8 a.m. to escort you out." I stared at the dark walls of the home I paid off 30 years ago, realized the locks had already been changed from the outside. The morning air was a razor. I sat on the edge of my bed, fully dressed in my best suit, the one I wore to Martha's funeral. My medals were pinned to the lapel, polished and heavy. I didn't have a suitcase packed. I didn't think I'd need one. I figured if I stood my ground, showed them I was still the man who worked the blast furnaces at J&L Steel, they'd see the mistake they were making. A black SUV pulled up at 8:01 a.m. David stepped out, followed by a woman in a beige blazer carrying a clipboard. They didn't knock. David used a key I didn't know he had. He walked into my living room and didn't even look at me. He started looking at my furniture, pointing at things. "The hutch is worth something," he told the woman. "The rest is junk. Toss it." "I'm sitting right here, David," I said. My voice was a low growl, the one that used to make him sit up straight at the dinner table. He finally looked at me, but there was no respect in his eyes, only pity, and pity is a poison to a man like me. "Dad, don't make this hard. You're 79. You forgot to pay the electric bill. You're a danger to yourself." "I didn't forget," I said, standing up. My knees popped and I had to grab the bedpost for a second. The bank said the funds were diverted. They said a family representative authorized a transfer. David's eyes flickered, just for a second, a telltale sign I recognized from when he was a boy, lying about a broken window. "I moved the money to a protected account for your care. You aren't thinking clearly." The woman with the clipboard stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, I'm Sarah. We have a lovely room waiting for you at Silver Oaks. It's much warmer than it is here." "I own this house," I said, "free and clear." "Actually, Dad," David said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket, "you signed the deed over to me last Christmas. Don't you remember? You said you wanted me to have it." I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered signing papers, yes. David told me they were for his daughter's college fund, a grand paternal consent form, he'd called it. I had trusted my son. I hadn't put on my reading glasses. "You lied to me," I whispered. David didn't deny it. He just checked his watch. "The movers will be here at noon. Let's go."
As they led me toward the door, I saw David pick up Martha's vial of insulin from the counter and toss it into the trash bag he was carrying.
Silver Oaks wasn't a home. It was a waiting room for the cemetery. It smelled like bleach and overcooked cabbage. They put me in room 412, a beige box with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. My care plan involved a plastic wristband and a schedule that told me when I was allowed to be hungry. I sat in the plastic chair by the bed for 3 days. I didn't eat. The nurses would come in, chirp something about social hour, and leave when I didn't respond. I was mourning, not for my house, but for the son I thought I raised. I kept thinking about the time he fell off his bike, and I stayed up all night holding an ice pack to his knee. I wondered where that boy went. On the 4th day, a man in a navy blue uniform walked past my open door. He stopped, looked at the medals on my jacket, which I refused to take off, and stepped in. "1st Marine Division?" he asked. "Chosin Reservoir," I replied, my voice raspy from disuse. He stood a little straighter. "3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Name's Miller. What are you doing in a place like this, Sergeant?" "My son decided I was a liability," I said. "He took the house, he took the pension. He thinks I'm a ghost already." Miller sat on the edge of the other bed. "Happens more than you'd think. These kids, they see the gray hair and they think the brain is turned to mush. They forget who built the world they're standing on." "I threw away my wife's medicine," I said, and for the first time my voice cracked. He threw her away like she was garbage. Miller leaned in close. "Listen, Carter, I've been here 6 months. I've seen how they handle the paperwork. If your son moved your money, there's a trail. This place is expensive. He's paying for this room with your own sweat. But there's a guy who comes in on Fridays, a pro bono lawyer, works for the VA. He likes a good fight." I looked at the brick wall outside my window. I felt a spark deep down in the coal bed of my chest. It was the same feeling I had before a shift at the mill, the knowledge that there was work to be done. "I don't have any money to pay a lawyer," I said. Miller grinned, showing a missing molar. "He doesn't want money. He wants justice, and he's coming tomorrow." That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the door. At 2 a.m., a nurse came in to check my vitals. She looked at my chart and sighed. "Still haven't eaten, Raymond? We might have to move you to the high care wing. People don't usually come back from there." The lawyer was younger than I expected. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, but his eyes were sharp. His name was Marcus. He sat across from me in the crowded cafeteria, ignoring the sound of clinking plastic trays and the moans of the residents. "Mr. Carter," Marcus said, opening a file, "Mr. Miller told me about your situation. I did some preliminary digging. Your son didn't just move your money. He filed a determination of incapacity using a signature from a doctor who lost his license 3 months ago for insurance fraud." I gripped the edge of the table. "He made me look crazy?" "He made you look senile," Marcus corrected. "It's a common tactic. Once he has the POA and the deed, he can liquidate everything. I checked the real estate listings this morning. Your house in Pittsburgh? It's already under contract. Closing is in 10 days. The room started to spin. My house, the one where Martha and I tracked the height of our grandkids on the pantry door, the one with the workshop in the basement where I fixed every broken toy David ever owned. "Can you stop it?" I asked. Marcus looked at me solemnly. "I can try, but here's the problem. David has the legal upper hand right now because of that document. To fight this, we need to prove you are of sound mind and that he used undue influence or outright fraud. It's a long road, Raymond, and they'll try to sedate you if they know we're talking." "Let them try," I said. Just then, the cafeteria doors swung open. David walked in, looking out of place in his designer jeans. He spotted me and Marcus, and his face went white. He marched over, his heels clicking on the linoleum. "Who are you? David demanded, looking at Marcus. "Dad, I told you no visitors without my approval. You're confused. You shouldn't be talking to strangers." Marcus stood up slowly. He was taller than David. "I'm his counsel, David, and I suggest you stop talking before you say something that ends up in a deposition." David laughed, a harsh, nervous sound. "Counsel? With what money? Dad's broke. I'm the one paying the bills here." He turned to me, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. "Listen to me, you old fool. You're done. Enjoy the pudding and the naps. I'm selling the house and there's nothing you can do about it." I looked my son in the eye. I didn't see the boy I loved. I saw a predator. I reached up and gripped his wrist, the same wrist I used to hold when I taught him how to swing a hammer. I squeezed hard. "I survived the Frozen Chosen, David. You think I'm afraid of you?" David wrenched his arm away, his face turning a deep, angry red. "Fine. If that's how you want it, you can stay in the lockdown ward. Nurse!" They moved me that evening. The lockdown ward was behind a heavy steel door that required a code. No windows, just a fluorescent light that hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. They took my suit. They took my medals. They gave me a thin white gown that didn't close in the back. I felt the first wave of true despair then, sitting on a plastic-covered mattress, shivering in the sterile cold. This was how they broke you. They stripped away your dignity until you started acting like the animal they claimed you were. A nurse came in with a small paper cup. "Medication time, Raymond." "I don't take medication, only my blood pressure pill, and I take that in the morning." "This is something to help you relax," she said, her voice robotic. "Doctor's orders." I knew what it was, a chemical straitjacket. If I took that pill, I'd be a vegetable by morning. I'd be exactly what David needed me to be for the court. I looked at the cup, then at the nurse. She looked tired, overworked. She didn't hate me, she just didn't see me as a person. "I need a glass of water," I said. "My throat is dry." When she turned to the sink, I tucked the pill under my tongue. I took a sip of the water, swallowed the liquid, and kept the pill hidden. As soon as she left, I spat it into the toilet. I did this 3 times over the next 24 hours. My head stayed clear, but I pretended to be groggy. I slumped in the chair. I let my jaw hang open. I became the useless old man they wanted. On the second night, the night shift nurse was a young kid, maybe 20. He was scrolling on his phone, sitting at the desk just outside my door. "Hey," I croaked. He looked up, startled. "You okay, Mr. Carter?" I have a trunk," I said, slurring my words. "In my house, in the attic. There's a box of gold coins from the war. I wanted David to have them, but I forgot to tell him." The kid's eyes lit up. Greed is a universal language. "Gold coins? Are you sure?" "Under the floorboards, near the chimney," I whispered. "If you help me make one phone call, I'll tell you exactly where." The kid looked around. The ward was silent. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. He slid it through the meal slot in the door. "Make it fast. If my supervisor sees this, I'm fired." I didn't call David. I didn't call Marcus. I called the one person David feared more than anyone, his ex-wife, Sarah. "Sarah, it's Raymond. I need you to go to the house right now." "Raymond, where are you? David told me you moved to Florida." "He lied. And Sarah, he's selling the house. He's selling the house with your daughter's college fund inheritance still hidden inside the walls." Sarah was a good woman. David had left her for a younger version of himself years ago, but she had always stayed close to me. She knew the truth about him. She was at the house within 20 minutes. Through the phone, I heard her screaming, "David, open this door! I know you're in there!" "Dad, what's going on?" the young nurse whispered through the door. "Who are you calling?" "Just making things right, son," I said. I heard David's voice on the other end of the line, muffled but angry. "Sarah, what are you doing here? This is private property." "I have a court order for my daughter's belongings, David," she yelled, "and Raymond just called me. He's in a lockdown ward? Are you insane?" The phone went dead. The nurse snatched it back through the slot, his face pale. "You lied to me! There's no gold coins, is there?" "No," I said, standing up straight, the grogginess vanishing from my eyes. "But there's something much more valuable coming your way. It's called a subpoena." The next morning, the lockdown doors opened. It wasn't the nurse, it was Marcus, and he wasn't alone. He was with two men in suits who didn't look like they were from the nursing home. They were from the state attorney general's office. "Mr. Carter," one of the men said, "we've been monitoring this facility for some time. Your son's doctor just turned state evidence. He confessed to signing dozens of fraudulent incapacity forms in exchange for kickbacks from Silver Oaks." They led me out of the ward. As I walked down the hall, I saw the facility director being led out in handcuffs. The care industry was about to get a very loud wake-up call. But as we reached the lobby, I saw David. He was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. When he saw me, he stood up, looking desperate. "Dad, listen, I can explain. The business was failing. I was going to lose everything. I was going to pay you back, I swear." I walked past him. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. "Mr. Carter," as we reached his car, "we stopped the sale of the house, but there's a problem. David took your pension checks for the last 4 months. He spent them, every dime. You have your house back, but you have no money to keep the lights on." I looked at my hands, thick, calloused, and shaking slightly. "I've been broke before, Marcus. Being broke is temporary. Being a coward is forever." But as we pulled up to my house, I saw something that made my heart stop. There was a moving truck in the driveway, and it wasn't David's. I stepped out of the car, my breath catching. The moving truck was filled with furniture, but it wasn't mine. A group of men in work shirts were carrying a sofa into my front door. "What's this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I thought you said the sale was stopped." "It was," Marcus said, looking confused. A man in a flannel shirt walked down the ramp of the truck. He looked familiar. He had the same jawline, the same steady gait. He stopped when he saw me, and his eyes filled with tears. "Uncle Raymond?" It was Tommy, my brother's son. I hadn't seen him in 15 years, not since my brother's funeral. He lived out in western PA, working the coal mines. "Tommy?" I whispered. He ran over and pulled me into a hug that nearly broke my ribs. He smelled like sawdust and diesel. "Sarah called me. She told me what that snake David did to you. I gathered the boys. We're moving in, Ray." "Moving in?" "Not forever," Tommy said, wiping his eyes. "But my crew, we're all between jobs. We're gonna fix this place up. New roof, new plumbing, the works. And my sister Annie, she's a CPA. She's already gone through your bank records. She found where David hid the rest of your mother's inheritance." I sat down on the porch steps, the weight of the last week finally hitting me. I wasn't alone. I had spent so long feeling useless, feeling like a relic of a forgotten age, that I forgot that family isn't just the people you share blood with. It's the people who show up when the furnace goes out. "I can't pay you, Tommy," I said. "You already did," Tommy said, pointing to the garage. "You taught me how to weld in that garage when I was 12. You gave me my first job. We're just returning the favor." For the first time in years, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with a radiator. But as the sun began to set over the Pittsburgh skyline, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. An officer stepped out, looking grim. "Raymond Carter, we need you to come down to the station. There's been an incident involving your son." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Is he okay?" "He's alive," the officer said, "but he's been arrested, and he's claiming you're the one who stole the money." The interrogation room was cold.
I sat on one side of the metal table, Marcus beside me. On the other side sat a detective with a face like a bulldog. "Your son claims you authorized the transfers," the detective said, sliding a document across the table. "He says you wanted to hide the assets from the VA so you could qualify for more benefits. He says it was your idea." I looked at the signature. It looked like mine. It was a perfect forgery. David had spent years watching me sign checks, watching me sign birthday cards. He knew every loop, every slant. "I didn't sign this," I said firmly. "The notary says you did," the detective replied, "and the notary is a respected member of the community. Why would he lie?" "Because David paid him," I said. "That's a bold accusation, Mr. Carter. Do you have proof?" I looked at Marcus. He looked worried. This was David's final play. If he couldn't have the house, he'd make sure I spent my final years in a prison cell instead of a nursing home. He was willing to destroy me to save himself. "I want to speak to my son," I said. "That's not a good idea, Raymond," Marcus whispered. "I want to speak to him," I repeated, "alone." The detective hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes later, David was let in. He looked terrible. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, and he had a bruise on his cheek, likely from Sarah's confrontation. He sat down, refusing to look at me. "Why, David?" I asked. The room was silent. I didn't sound angry. I just sounded tired. "I would have given you everything. All you had to do was ask." "You wouldn't have," David hissed, finally looking up. His eyes were wild. "You would have stayed in that house until you were 100, clutching on to every dime while I struggled. I have a life, Dad. I have status. I couldn't let you drag me down with your old school pride." "Status," I repeated. I leaned forward. "Is that what Martha's insulin was? A drag on your status?" "She was dead, Dad. It was just a bottle of liquid." I felt a coldness settle over me, a clarity I hadn't felt since the war. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook, my mill log. I'd kept it for 40 years. Every shift, every ton of steel, every penny earned. "You forgot one thing, David," I said. "I'm a steel worker. We don't just build things, we keep records." I opened the book to the last page. Stuck to the inside cover was a small digital voice recorder, the kind I used to record my grocery lists because my hands were too shaky to write sometimes. I pressed play. David's voice filled the room. "I've already spoken to the notary, Dad. He'll sign whatever I tell him to. You're useless now. Just sign the damn paper and I'll make sure you're taken care of." David's face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. The silence in the room was absolute. The recording continued for another few seconds, the sound of me coughing and David's footsteps as he walked away. The detective, who had been listening from the observation window, stepped back into the room. He didn't look like a bulldog anymore. He looked disgusted. He walked over to David, grabbed him by the shoulder, and forced him to stand. "David Carter, you're being charged with elder abuse, grand larceny, and felony forgery," the detective said. David started to sob, not the sob of a man who was sorry, but the sob of a man who had finally been caught. "Dad, please, tell them it was a joke. I'll give it all back. I'll fix it." I stood up. My legs felt strong. I looked at my son, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no hate, just a profound sense of loss for the person he could have been. "You can't fix a broken soul, David," I said. I walked out of the station. Marcus followed me, a look of awe on his face. "Raymond, that recorder, When did you start carrying that?" "Since the day he told me I was becoming a liability," I said. "A man might be old, Marcus, but that doesn't mean he stopped watching his flank." As we drove back to the house, the rain began to fall. Not the cold, biting rain from a few days ago, but a soft spring rain, the kind that washes the soot off the Pittsburgh streets. When we arrived, the house was transformed. Tommy and his crew had been working through the night. The orange "disconnected" sticker was gone. The lights were glowing in every window. There was a wreath on the door that looked just like the ones Martha used to make. I walked into my kitchen. Tommy was there, along with Sarah and my granddaughter, Lily. They had a cake on the table. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," Lily said, running up to hug me. I held her tight. I looked around at the faces of the people who actually loved me. I had my house, I had my dignity, I had my life back. But as I sat down to blow out the candles, my chest tightened, a sharp, familiar pain. I reached for my pocket, but then I remembered. I didn't have my pills. David had thrown them away. "Raymond," Tommy asked, his smile fading, "you okay?" I looked at the cake, the flickering flames blurring in my vision. I felt a strange peace. I had won. I had proven I wasn't useless. "I'm fine," I whispered. "I'm just tired." I closed my eyes for just a second, and when I opened them, the room was different. I wasn't in the kitchen anymore. The pain in my chest was gone. I was standing on the shore of the Monongahela River, the sun setting behind the point. The water was still, reflecting the golden light of a Pittsburgh evening. "You took your time, Raymond," a voice said. I turned. Martha was standing there. She looked like she did the day I retired, vibrant, healthy, her eyes full of that mischievous spark I fell in love with in 1962. She was holding a vial of insulin in one hand and my veteran's cap in the other. "Is it over?" I asked. "It's over," she said. "You did good. You showed them what a Carter is made of." I looked back. I could see the kitchen. I could see Tommy calling 911, Sarah holding my hand, Lily crying. It should have hurt to see them like that, but I knew they would be okay. Tommy would keep the house, Sarah would get the inheritance for Lily. My story was written in the steel of this city, and it was a story of a man who never broke. As for David, justice moved swiftly. Without my testimony, the recordings and the confession from the doctor were enough. He lost his firm, his house, and his freedom. He sat in a cell realizing too late that the useless man he discarded was the only thing that had been holding his world together. I reached out and took Martha's hand. Her skin was warm. "I missed you," I said. "I know," she smiled. "But look." She pointed across the river. Thousands of people were walking across the bridges. They were the ones the world had tried to forget. The veterans, the laborers, the grandmothers, the quiet ones. They were all walking with their heads held high, their faces glowing in the light. I put on my cap, straightened my shoulders, and stepped forward. I wasn't a liability. I wasn't a ghost. I was Raymond Carter, and I was finally going home.